Hello. Welcome back to Cocktails and Cliff Notes. I'm your host, Mason, and today we are going to be talking about one of America's deepest betrayals. This is the story of the man who almost won the Revolutionary War and the man who almost single handedly destroyed it. And yes, those two men actually happen to be the same person. We are talking about Benedict Arnold today. But before we get into that, we are going to keep going with some of our healthy drinks in this next upcoming series just to kick off the new year the right way. We're going to be doing the tropical green colada, and this is just a quick, easy smoothie. You can add some protein powder and make it a post workout if you want. So, let me show you how I'm making that. And then once we have our drinks, we can really talk. Okay, we're going to start off by adding a good amount of kale. I freeze my kale for my smoothies, so just a fun little tip. Keep it fresher for longer. Then we're going to do half a banana. We're going to do a good amount of mango, both frozen, of course. Then we're going to do a fourth of an avocado. I also freeze the avocado. We're going to add just a little bit of coconut, a scoop of protein powder. And just assume if you ever see me adding protein powder to anything, it is definitely vanilla. I just do not care for chocolate. Then we're adding a good amount of coconut water to this. We'll pop our lid on here and blend. Mm. Mm. It tastes so much better than it looks, I promise. It's not bad. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. Now that we have our drinks, let's go ahead and get into our discussion today because we're talking about one of the most significant betrayals in like the earliest part of American history. This was going on as we were fighting for independence, and that was a very crucial time. And this betrayal came from somebody who wasn't nobody. He was at one point a very valiant and very important person in the US. So let's just go back. We're going to take it all the way back. We're not going to start with the betrayal. We're going to actually begin with a young boy who wanted to be a hero. Benedict Arnold, he was born in 1741 in Norwich, Connecticut, and he was born into a very well respected, very prominent family. All of his ancestors had been really wealthy and successful in their respective fields, and his father placed a lot of expectations on him for greatness, for notoriety. He expected a lot from his son. Now, as Benedict grew, it was very unfortunate because tragedy continually struck the family over and over and in many different forms. Now, his very uptight and oppressive father was actually a drunk, and he really let that run his life. On top of that, illness knocked on their door every couple weeks, it seemed like. Benedict watched as all of his siblings succumbed to multiple different illnesses, and by his teen years, Arnold had buried 4 of his siblings. Now, this just caused his father to drink more, and destroyed by his grief, he spent most of his life drunk, and he managed to lose the entire family fortune. He also happened to tarnish the family reputation, and he destroyed his own health in the process. Young Benedict watched helplessly as everything he had once known crumbled before him. This actually lit a fire inside young Benedict. He had this deep-rooted fury for significance. He wanted to be known. He wanted to restore his family name. He wanted to have money again. And so he tried a couple different things. He apprenticed as a pharmacist and then as a merchant. But he just really wasn't the type of person that was cut out for managing a small shop or just being a normal guy. He was very restless. He was very charismatic. He was very hot tempered. On top of that, he was terrifyingly brave. Some might even say arrogant. He was very easily insulted. He had this hunger for glory, and he was brilliant in the field. So, In a desperate search for significance, by the age of 21, he had opened his own trading business. He would sail to the West Indies, he would sail to the New England ports, and he was a daredevil. He was a perfectionist. He was somebody that people greatly admired and somewhat feared. And even though a lot of these positive qualities were drawing attention, a lot of people said that he might be just a bit too proud and that he was maybe taking things a little too far in some scenarios. But at the end of the day, he really just did not want to live small. He did not play small and he didn't want to live a small life. He wanted to carve his name into the fabric of history, and he was on a mission to do so by any means necessary. When the revolution finally began, Arnold did not hesitate. He was not going to sit in the background on this one. He didn't have it in him. There was no way that he was going to let that happen and not get involved. That seems crazy. He was getting in there and he was getting in there fast, and he was going to make a name for himself. He ran towards the revolution with everything that he had, and he got in the game very, very quickly, because in 1775, when the very first shots rang out at Lexington and later at Concord, Arnold marched immediately with a group of Connecticut militia. Then he proposed an audacious plan. He wanted to go in and he wanted to take the fort Ticonderoga. I always feel like I'm saying it wrong, but he's like, let's go take Ticonderoga and let's take their cannons too. Even though Congress barely knew who he was, Congress was actually like, okay, let's see what you can do. Try it if you can. So he goes on this mission. Fate actually introduces yet another legend into this story, and that would be Ethan Allen. And he and the Green Mountain Boys also had their sights set on Ticonderoga. They team up with Arnold and they're like, we're going to go in. Now, these two men clashed immediately. They really didn't care for each other. They were not besties. I think it was probably just a fight over who was going to get the glory. We both have the same mission, but we wouldn't do it the same way type thing. It was just a clashing of personalities and two men who were squabbling for notoriety. Allen, he was a frontier brawler. He was a hardened, good old boy that was like, we're going to get a dog in this fight and we're going to go for it. Arnold, he was a much more polished merchant officer. And so they had different approaches and different management styles, I suppose, and it wasn't working. They argued over command relentlessly. They were always wanting to be in charge, and the other one was always there to question the other's authority. It was difficult, but ultimately they captured the fort together. Now, Arnold's reputation because of this obviously grew, and he was beginning to gain some momentum as far as becoming someone great goes. However, behind the scenes, officers were already groaning about Arnold and saying that he was arrogant, which he very much was. Well, this made Arnold feel very unappreciated. He felt undervalued and overworked and underpaid. That was him. He was not loving the fact that nobody was giving him the attention and the accolades that he thought he deserved. What he really wanted was he wanted George Washington's eye. He wanted his attention. He wanted respect from Congress, and he really wanted the recognition that he felt entitled to. Now, to be fair, he did actually deserve it because he was doing a lot of good. He was giving it everything he had, and he was valiant and brilliant in battle, and he seemed to fear nothing. And later in 1775, Arnold actually led one of the most brutal expeditions in all of American history. It was a march through the Maine wilderness to surprise the British in Quebec. Now, this journey was downright apocalyptic. It was horrible. Freezing rivers, rotting food, starvation. It was boats smashed in the rapids, men falling in the forest. And when I say falling, I think you know what I mean. There were horses that were quite literally just collapsing, and soldiers were forced to eat candle wax. They were forced to eat bark. They would eat leather. They were hungry. It wasn't going well, but still Arnold kept going. He was always in the front. He was always pushing his men. And to be honest, his men really did admire him. They were trauma bonded or something like that because they were really like, we love you, Arnold. And I mean, honestly, he was doing stuff that no men would dare do. So when they finally reached Quebec, Arnold is worn, he's exhausted, he's starving, he's standing before this massive fortress, and he just says, we attack. And he did this with impossible courage. And during the attack, he actually was shot in the leg and he was carried from the battlefield cursing, refusing to stop giving orders. Now, his attack did ultimately fail, but his bravery became very legendary and was getting him the attention that he so craved. Now, George Washington, he even called Arnold a man of military genius. So he was getting the right eyes on him by his compass. And so he felt pretty good about that. However, Congress was not exactly feeling the same way. They barely thanked him for his efforts, and this was a wound that refused to heal. So, in 1777 came the campaign that actually changed the war, and this was Saratoga. Now, British General John Burgoyne, he had marched south from Canada. His idea in doing that was that he wanted to cut the colonies in half. Now, at this time, the Americans were largely fractured, they were very confused, and they were being led by the vain and indecisive General Horatio Gates. Now, one thing is that they did have a secret weapon that they never seemed to appreciate, and that particular weapon was Benedict Arnold himself. So Arnold the Lion rode into battle like a force of nature. He's cursing, he's rallying the troops, he's charging headlong directly into fire. And at Freedom Farms and Bemis Heights, Arnold's courage and strategic brilliance actually shattered the British line. So he inspired so much trust, so much hope, that his presence alone changed the course of battle. Now, unfortunate for him, Gates came to really resent him. Gates actually removed him from command out of pure jealousy and jealousy alone. Well, of course, Arnold, with Arnold's headstrong ways and his personality, this infuriated him. He made the collect decision that he was just going to ignore Gates and he was going to do what he wanted to do anyway. So he rode into battle, leading a charge that broke Burgoyne's army. Now, during this particular battle, a musket ball actually smashed into his leg, and it was the same leg that had been wounded in Quebec, and it actually almost cost him his life. He came very close to the brink on that one. Now, on top of that, his horse actually fell down and left him with many, many, many broken bones. And it was said that Arnold was screaming in agony as his men dragged him off the battlefield. That being said, the battle was won. And I will say that Benedict Arnold, more than any other man on that field, did actually deliver the first major American victory of the entire revolution. It was huge, and something that should be acknowledged with stuff like this too is the psychological benefits that come from something like that are just as good as everything else that looks good on paper. It's really important. These battles changed the course of history, and so this was such a tipping point for the American Revolution, and it was really largely because of Benedict Arnold. That being said, the world actually hailed Horatio Gates. Congress hailed Gates. Europe hailed Gates. And Arnold, he was left wounded. He was ignored yet again, and he was overshadowed by a man who had done far less than him. If you think about the psychology of Benedict Arnold, this is not going on. And it's actually said that a man can survive wounds of the flesh, but wounds to a man's pride will be the thing that takes him slowly. That's kind of what was happening. So Arnold, he ends up returning home to Philadelphia. And he's got a shattered leg. He's got a shattered sense of justice. He's really boo-hooing about the way that things went down solely because he wasn't getting the attention he wanted. He had actually spent a great deal of his own money outfitting these troops. Now, this was money that Congress actually refused to reimburse him. And so he was looking at this mountain of crushing debt, and he couldn't make sense out of it. How he could fight so valiantly, get no attention, and still be underwater financially. That didn't sit well with him. He wasn't liking it. And these small little seeds of betrayal are starting to be planted and they're starting to fester. Now, on top of all of this, he was actually being investigated for corruption. Now, this was something that was brought on largely and facilitated mostly from political enemies. It didn't actually have a lot of merit at the time. It pissed him off even worse. That was such a shocking insult to who he was and who he wanted to be and what he wanted to be known for, and it just went all over him. His temper just boiled. He was enraged. He felt cornered. He felt insulted. He felt very much betrayed. And then came Miss Peggy Shippen. Now, Peggy, she was the 18-year-old daughter of a very wealthy loyalist family. She was very beautiful. She was very well connected. She was charming. She was educated. And Arnold just fell in love. Oh, he fell in love with Peggy. And through Peggy, he was actually introduced to yet another new friend. Now, this would be Major John Andre. John Andre was a British officer. John Andre was charming. He was very artistic. He was refined and sophisticated, and he was a master spy. Arnold's name had been dragged through the mud by enemies in Congress. Nobody really liked this guy. I mean, he really did kind of get the short end of the stick. Or maybe he just had such an abrasive personality that people were just like, we do not like you. This isn't working. Nobody cares to be around you. I don't know what it was, because it really does seem like he did not get the attention he deserved. And it seems like a lot of people kind of had it out for him. So either jealousy was really fueling that, or he just sucked. I don't know what it was, but he was getting drugged through the mud. I mean, that's a great term for it. He was getting drugged through the mud. For sure. And truthfully, he had sacrificed more than nearly any other officer. He had been on the brink of being out this game twice. He had won major victories. He had been offended, ignored, disrespected. It was just bad for him. And he really began to ask himself, what has rebellion earned me? Why am I treated as an enemy by my own side? And he could not understand why Congress rewards incompetence and punishes service. He couldn't wrap his brain around it, couldn't make sense out of it. He's in this hell of his own mind trying to figure out why he was not getting anywhere in his life. Well, the British, through Andre and through Peggy, actually ended up making him a very tempting offer. There were people behind the scenes basically saying he's ready for the taking, so put the prize on the table. Now, the prize was mostly just money. It was rank, it was recognition, it was respect, and above all, it was revenge on all the people who had humiliated him. Arnold's really beginning to slip now. He's really like, how can I refuse this? Nothing else works. Why would I stay loyal to people who quite literally will not do anything that I want them to do? So in 1780, Arnold was actually placed in charge of West Point, which was a key American fortress on the Hudson River. He kept thinking that if West Point were to fall, the British could split the colonies, which would be detrimental to their force. He even thought that that alone might be what could end this war. So the official deal was that Arnold was promised 20,000 pounds. Not sure what inflation looks like, but that seems pretty good. And he was going to be promised a high command in the British Army, and there would be, quote, restoration of his honor. Arnold finally agreed. That was good enough for him. He was in. Couldn't think of a reason not to do it. He was angry. He was hurt. Truthfully, he needed a psychotherapist or something. He and John Andre planned this secret meeting. They're going to hand off documents. It's a betrayal in both ink and in maps. And so they decide to meet near the Hudson River under the cover of darkness. During this meeting, Arnold gave Andre detailed plans on how to surrender West Point. He gave him every step-by-step and play-by-play that was going to be needed for this to get done. And this, in and of itself, was complete and total treason. This was betrayal. It was full. It was complete. And worst of all, it was intentional. There was no accident, and make no mistake, he knew exactly what he was doing. This meeting comes to an end, and Arnold returns to West Point. Now, fate actually intervenes. Fate, bad luck, I don't know what it was, but something major happened, and that was that Andre actually was trying to return to British lines and was stopped by 3 American militiamen. Now, naturally, they searched him because they're like, what is this British guy doing over here? So they give him a good pat down. They end up finding Arnold's papers hidden in his boot. So this particular plot unraveled really before they could even get it off the ground. At this time, Washington was actually on his way to have breakfast with Arnold. He actually gets the news as he's on his way mid-river by a messenger who delivered the documents. So when Washington actually reached Arnold's quarters, he found a table that was set for a meal, but Arnold was gone. Arnold had somehow figured things out and had fled down the river in a British ship. Now, he escaped. Andre obviously did not. Now, it was said that Andre was hanged as a spy, and it was so tragic, and he held his dignity, and there was so much bravery involved that it said that it actually moved his executioners. I'm not so certain what could have possibly gone on there that they had so much respect for him, even as he was being tried for treason and punished. Shouldn't I say tried? No, he basically just got the boot. Mm, yeah, he got the boot. Anyway, that being said, Washington himself never actually forgave Arnold for Andre's death. In the time following these events, Arnold actually served as this brigadier general in the British Army, and he was leading raids against American towns. And the crazy thing is, he actually burnt parts of Connecticut, which was his birthplace, his home state, and he seemed to have no remorse whatsoever. He also led attacks in Virginia, and American soldiers literally got to the point where they would scream his name as a curse. They hated him. Now, Washington actually said that he was a man of no principles, and Franklin basically made the point that Judas himself only betrayed one man and Arnold had betrayed his entire country. It's pretty bad to be compared to Judas at all. And even worse, that it's being kind of insinuated that his crime was worse than that of Judas Iscariot. My God, these are such high level betrayals. They're so, so impactful. Now, in Arnold's final years, things were a bit tough because Britain did not embrace him. He was very useful to the British, but he was very untrustworthy, as you can imagine. He was a traitor to his homeland. So it was like, we don't want anything to do with you. And to America, he was the straight up devil. He was the devil walking, and everybody hated him. If anybody would have seen him, it would have ended poorly for him. So he ended up moving to England, and he lived the rest of his life in bitterness, financial struggle. He had really bad health. His wounded leg never healed properly, and that was always an issue for him, and it haunted him. It plagued him in the physical world and mentally. Now, he ended up passing in 1801 at the age of 60. He was mostly forgotten, but anybody that did remember him, very rightly so, despised him. Now, in the end, he reportedly said to his doctor that he wanted to pass on in his American uniform. And he said very often, God forgive me for ever putting on another. He was full of regret. There was nothing that went right for him. He was hated by everyone. Now, the story of Benedict Arnold is interesting because he wasn't a villain from the start. It's more of a tragedy in kind of a classical sense because he was one of America's most brilliant battlefield commanders, and he was a man of immense courage. He repeatedly risked everything for the cause, and he was just a man crushed by pride, bitterness, debt, and political humiliation. He just felt so unrewarded. He felt so unseen. He felt betrayed by the country he had fought to create. And in the end, he betrayed it in return. And another interesting thing is that if he would have passed at Saratoga, he would quite literally be remembered as one of the greatest heroes in all of American history. Instead, though, he lived and he made choices that would stain his name forever. A true hero did fall, but his fall actually began long before he crossed enemy lines. It began with wounds that no surgeon, even modern surgeons, could not mend. It was just wounds to pride, wounds of his honor, it was wounds of the soul. And that perhaps is the greatest tragedy of all because there's really just no coming back from that. You can't heal from certain things if you don't want to. And he didn't want to. He fed these issues and these deep rooted psychological illnesses. I do find it really, really worth mentioning that he was remembered forever. He did ultimately get what he wanted. He just got it in a way that was so nefarious and so sick and insidious and repellent. Is it worth it? Were his goals and the things he desired completely misguided? Absolutely. Absolutely. He wanted the notoriety more than he wanted to be honorable. And in a sense, he got notoriety, but he lost all honor. So It's just not necessarily worth it. I will say one thing that makes me feel a little bit better for him is the fact that he did get what he wanted. We're still talking about him. Most people know Benedict Arnold. It's one of my favorite insults when I'm trying to like tease around with someone and I call him a Benedict. That's funny. But he died bitter, angry, poor, unhealthy, unwell, couldn't walk right. And he could have been one of the greatest American heroes we've maybe ever had. But it's just the choices that lead us to hell. So be careful. Be careful out there, my sweet little Benedicts. Best form of eggs. That's for sure. That really is my favorite breakfast food. Eggs Benedict Arnold. Thanks so much. We're going to keep doing this. Drink your smoothies and your protein shakes and get lots of water because it's a new year. It's time to finally lose that 10 pounds, cut back on drinking, whatever other goals you've got. And if you do have some fun goals, share them with me. You might inspire me. I love a good goal. Let me know what you think about Benedict Arnold. Really, really sad, tragic story. It's that type of story where you're conflicted between I hate this person and oh my God, I'm so sad for this person. Not everything is absolute. You want to hate him when you really know about him and know how sad his life was. And really, honestly, if you think about it, he probably lived his entire life trying to please his dad, even though his dad wasn't around anymore. That was just ingrained in him from such a young age that he had to be successful. And then just through events of his childhood and choices he made as an adult, he really, really dug himself into a hole. So, anyway, let me know if there's anybody that you want me to talk about or look into or that you think I would be interested in, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers to traitorous plans being thwarted. I will see you soon.